Hey everyone, Jonathan here with a quick message before we start today's show. It's October, and over this month, we are on the road to 400 episodes of the Weekly Stuff podcast. That big milestone episode will be released on October 25th at the end of the month, and along the way, we have a great month of episodes planned. We also want you, the listener, to be involved with us for this, so please make sure you're subscribed to the show in your podcast app of choice or on our YouTube channel, and leave a rating or a review in your podcast app of choice, and reach out to us online to tell us about your favorite memories from 400 episodes of podcasts. Your favorite episode, your favorite review, your favorite argument, whatever it is, I would love to hear about it and tell it to the rest of the listeners. Just message me at Jonathan Lack on Twitter, and we'll include it in a listener mail segment in the 400th episode. This has been one hell of a journey, and I am so excited for the next month, and we're so happy to have you along for the ride. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we have a bunch of news to catch up on from the last 2 weeks. We did have an episode last week, but it was pre-recorded, including details on the new season of Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, a Nintendo Direct that we have to cover, and just absolutely horrifying news about the Mario movie they're making. And most importantly in news, the most significant Doctor Who news in years, and something big to talk about there. So really excited to talk about all of that. Sean, you've been playing some games. You're going to tell us a little bit about Deathloop and Lost Judgment. I've mostly just been playing Genshin Impact and being very busy with work and family stuff. So I don't have a ton of other stuff to tell you about, other than I've been working my way through Reconquista in G, new Gundam show that that'll be the next Weekly Suit Gundam when we get to that, and I'm loving that. So that's fun. But yeah, mostly you'll be telling us about games.
Yeah, but it's just generally one of our classic grab bag episodes of the Weekly Stuff, and properly to the name of why we kind of
yes.
called it stuff in the first place for the podcast. It's like, we're just going to talk about some stuff.
Yeah, so speaking of stuff, I mean, Sean, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so as you said, like I've been spending a lot of time with game stuff. So I finished Deathloop, because we mentioned it very briefly the last time we recorded a podcast, which was 2 weeks ago. And it's not that long a game. I probably finished it in like maybe 13 or 14 hours. Like that a lot. I'll talk about that in depth a little bit. Then also I've been putting a lot of time into Lost Judgment, which it almost makes me feel bad for Deathloop, because Deathloop is a good game. But Lost Judgment is a fucking amazing game. This is the sequel to Judgment, or Judge Eyes, as it was called in Japan, the Arkane Studios game. And I feel like not having a podcast where I can just talk about Deathloop without having had a better game to talk about it feels like it kind of stole its thunder in like my headspace. Because I'm like, I think I've spent maybe 15, 18 hours in Lost Judgment, and that game is fucking phenomenal. But the other thing I want to talk about briefly is that I watched all of the Star Wars Visions episodes. I want to kind of shout it out because I don't feel like it got a huge amount of social media buzz, but it's really good. The Star Wars Visions is, if you have Disney Plus, you can watch it on there. It's a series of 9 anthology-style episodes of Star Wars anime. It's kind of that classic thing that Western Studios, they used to do this more. We don't do it as much anymore, but like Animatrix was the thing that started this trend of Western Studios basically hiring a bunch of animation studios and anime directors in Japan to make just like one-off little episode anthology style stories in a franchise. There's the Animatrix, you've got the Halo one, there's both a Marvel one and a DC one, and now there's a Star Wars one, and it's 9 episodes, and I think they're all really good. They range from like good to, I think there's a couple of like really great episodes in there, with the first episode, The Duel, being to me probably the best one. I feel like that's probably why they made it number one in the orders because it's the best one. But all across all 9 episodes, there's a huge amount of variety. All of them are very different. They tend to all be stories focused on like the Jedi side of things. So it's still within that realm of Star Wars. But all the like animation styles are super unique. Other than Studio Trigger, every single episode is by a different studio. Studio Trigger has 2 episodes, but they're 2 different directors and they're totally different styles. It's just like top to bottom, I think they're really good. So if people like Star Wars, you should watch it because they're all just really good Star Wars things. If you like anime, you should watch it because they're all good anime things. And if you like Star Wars and you like anime, then you absolutely should watch it because it's both those things and they're both fucking awesome. And it reminds you of where like the difference is between people in the West sort of aping a couple of like Japanese stylistic trends and putting it into Star Wars stuff, you know, like the like Kurosawa influence that Lucas had and stuff like that. There's a difference between that and then actual Japanese creators putting like their like history and their perspective and their culture into Star Wars. And it's really cool seeing that kind of taking it, that side of the influence that has always been there in Star Wars of the Japanese elements and making it feel a lot more sort of like real and lived in and authentic and like thorough. And that's kind of my main takeaway from all 9 episodes is that it really has that quality to it, that it merges Japanese culture and anime perspective with like really cool Star Wars storytelling phenomenally well. So people should watch that because it's fucking great.
That's awesome. I'm really excited to see it. I had not heard. I do feel like Disney just kind of dropped it without marketing, and that was weird.
Yeah, it did draw because they dropped all 9 episodes at the same time, so it wasn't a thing where you had to wait a week for each episode, which I think like is one of those. It makes sense as an anthology thing why you'd be like, let's just like have them all at once, so that way, you know, because some episodes, depending on your kind of like tastes, I think there's a couple episodes like episode 3 I know is very divisive because it's really like a big stylistic swing, so I think it was maybe smart in some ways to put them all out there so that if there's an episode that someone doesn't like, they can just move on to something else because all the episodes are, you know, it's an anthology, they're totally different, they're their own styles. But it then means that like it only I think made a little bit of buzz on the day that they all dropped. All the episodes are like 15 minutes-ish long, so they're not very long, so it's pretty easy to get through all of them. And then I feel like it didn't stick around much, which is disappointing because I think it's some of the best Star Wars stuff there's been. Like, to me, it's like as good as The Mandalorian and anything like that. So
it feels like the right thing to do might have been to do 2 a week and pair them. Mm-hmm. And try to find like good pairs within and like put them out in pairs so that like if there's one that's not your taste, there's another one, and then. Because that has worked for all the other Disney Plus stuff of having weekly releases and buzz around them. So even I feel like The Bad Batch, which was less talked about than like The Mandalorian, I definitely notice people every week talking about like, man, this was a good episode of The Bad Batch or something.
Yeah, me too.
So, but I will watch it at some point. It's just been busy. I've been busy with my own anime shit because I can tell you guys about the last couple weeks of my film club, my Giant Robots series.
Yes. We
watched Patlabor. The movie, the original Patlabor movie, and my brother and my cousin Tony were both there for that, so that was fun. They were there to see how that went down. Tony, she has not seen almost any anime in her life, so that was funny. Patlabor is actually a pretty good one if you're going to introduce someone. It's not that far out there. Mm-hmm. Patlabor was definitely a hit. I think the kids liked it. I think it was good after Gundam and before Macross. I definitely put it in there as like, let's do a sane thing. Yes. Because, just to give everyone context, we did Patlabor, then we're doing Macross, Gunbuster, Transformers the movie, Robot Jocks, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and Super Sentai. We are not doing anything that is not, like, crazy until, like, Thanksgiving. Uh-huh. So I think Patlabor was a good little palate cleanser. People liked it. That movie has a lot of interesting thematic stuff to it. I've said before I picked Patlabor 1 over 2, not because I prefer one or the other, but because 1 has more... A, with the big robots, and B, is not as reliant on cultural knowledge of Japanese history. But Patlabor 1 is extremely engaged in, like, religious allegory, and I think in a much more substantive way than most anime is, like an Evangelion, where it's really just symbols on screen. And so there was actually a lot of interesting discussion about that, because it's a big room with diverse backgrounds. But Patlabor, that was a lot of fun. That looked, God, that's a gorgeously animated movie. It looked good on the big screen. I got a rip of the Japanese Blu-ray we were watching, and it looked very good with like the original theatrical audio and everything. Same thing for Macross. We watched Do You Remember Love? That still, to me, looks like the most expensive animated thing ever made anywhere in the world. And I actually learned in my research that it kind of is for Japan. Yeah. You know how much that movie cost, Sean?
I mean, it's hundreds of millions of yen, right? Like
it cost 400 million yen in 1984. Yeah. The same year, that's the same year of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which no one would ever look at and say that movie looks cheap. Nausicaa was 180 million yen. Macross cost over double a Nausicaa, and it looks like it. It is just so hyper detailed and like beautifully animated. It's insane. And that movie definitely, boy, it's a lot of movie. It's really crazy. It's I think I did a pretty good intro on it, which was fun because I had to research all of the fucking like rights issues and Robotech, and God, Macross has a complicated history. But it was fun, and went over very good in the moment, and then had a good discussion afterwards. Because, man, there's just so much going on in that fucking movie. That's definitely one where, like, a half-hour discussion feels like you're scratching the surface.
Yeah, it is that thing of where I feel like, particularly in the West, like even if Gundam has never been, like, huge over here, it's been big enough with, like, Gundam Wing and G Gundam during the Toonami days and stuff that, like, people are vaguely familiar with it. But, like, Macross, because of the Robotech thing, never had any traction over here whatsoever as Macross. Like, Robotech was, like, reasonably popular. For people who don't know, the general thing is that in the 80s, Harmony Gold bought the rights to Robotech, or to Macross and then 2 other anime, and then kind of just recut them, re-edited them, and then obviously, like, redubbed them over and redid the scripts to turn it into one long show, basically, that takes place over 3 like generations or something. So they kind of created an original story out of 3 different anime series and then branded it as Robotech, and that has created this whole mess where like Macross basically doesn't really exist over here other than is that Blu-ray that just came out like a few weeks ago, is that actually Macross, or is that still just like the Macross section of Robotech?
That's the Macross section of Robotech, and I can tell you all about this because the real rights issue isn't even quite that. It's that Macross in Japan, like most anime, was a package deal by multiple partners, and it was the animation studio that sold the rights to Harmony Gold, and then the sponsor and Studio Nue, where like the main creators work, were like, what? You can't do that. We own the show. And so it was decades of litigation. It was only worked out this fucking year. And then the week I showed Macross in class, there's a Funimation release now of Robotech in HD. And that is the first of things to come. They apparently will be doing Macross and like the other stuff. They just started with like the easiest thing, which is Robotech, because they don't have to do any extra work for it other than the HD scans. They don't have to make subtitles or anything. So they are doing currently a Blu-ray release of Robotech in 3 parts. And then apparently they will be moving on to other Macross stuff. I don't know if that'll be through Funimation or someone else, but yeah, it will. They did the same thing with Speed Racer a couple years ago, where they did a set of the English Speed Racer and then one of Mahagogo, the Japanese show. So yeah.
But it's one of those things where it's just weird how Macross is like hugely popular in Japan.
Yeah.
But has like no mark whatsoever over here, other than in this like weird sort of like mutilated version with Robotech. And so it is always, I'm always like taken aback by how popular Macross is, because they don't think of it that way. Because, I haven't watched the Do You Remember Love movie, but I watched the TV show. And the TV show is interesting because it was so popular. I think we talked about this on the podcast. It might have been Weekly Studio Gundam, where it got so popular over its airing that they added on like 9 to 10 extra episodes, and sort of extended this like kind of epilogue style storyline that takes place after the ending of the main story, and that main story is what the movie covers. But in that original airing of Macross, like it was so sort of like touch and go early on that I think it's episode 8. It's one of the earlier episodes. It is definitely the worst animated episode of television I have ever seen in my entire life, and I've watched a lot of fucking anime. It was so bad that they had to reanimate large sections of it, and even then, when they reanimated it for a rebroadcast years later, it still is one of the worst animated episodes of any anime I've ever seen, because it was just, they like completely ran out of time. Like it was the you like making an episode of anime with like 2 people in a fucking basement with like string and some rocks or something.
I mean, I researched all of this.
Yeah.
Because the way it started was they had one sponsor who was sponsoring the show as like a year-long show. That fell through in pre-production because the sponsor wanted it to be a comedy and they wanted it to be more Gundam-esque. And then they get a new sponsor who wanted 27 episodes. Studio Nue is this little tiny thing that didn't do animation itself, so they're partnering with Tatsunoko and these other companies. Gainax is one of the first things Gainax does, is works on Macross. And so when the show premieres, they'd only finished 3 episodes. And the show premiered with 3 episodes finished, and then was this immediate, like, out-of-the-gate gigantic hit. And so it was this really awkward thing of, that's why it's, like, so touch and go. Kind of like Eva, only much faster. Eva doesn't show the seams until much later in its production.
Yeah, so it's just that thing of where, I guess the point of like talking about all this is that it's crazy to think about that is like, it is one of the, Do You Remember Love is one of the most expensive animated movies made in Japan. From this series that like it's the opposite of the Gundam story, right? Instead of it getting cut short, it got fucking extended past what its original episode count was. And so if, hopefully in the not too distant future, there'll be like easy, like, normal ways for people to get access to that stuff over here in the West. But if people haven't watched Macross, the TV show is fucking great. You have to deal with that one. I mean, it's a hilariously poorly animated episode where if it had a normal level of animation, it'd be one of the best episodes of the show, because it's actually a hugely important episode, because it's the first episode the main characters directly encounter the aliens when they're taken to the alien ship. But like, that show is phenomenal, and I'm sure the movie is great too. So people should check out Macross if they haven't, through whatever means you can, if you want to watch it now, and then hopefully you'll be able to buy a good-looking Blu-ray at some point in the future.
Yeah, and Do You Remember Love is a great starting point, because I haven't seen the show, and the movie is completely coherent on its own, because it was animated from the ground up, so they just rewrote it. It doesn't have like any of the compilation movie issues, because it's not a compilation movie. But anyway, yeah, that was fun. It's also been fun, Sean, in like all my research and introducing each movie, just like everything we've watched post Gundam and will watch for another couple weeks has major Gundam connections. Like Pat Labor, the mecha designer on Pat Labor, is the guy who worked on Double Zeta and Char's Counterattack and designed the new Gundam. So like I got to do a slide on the new Gundam and be like, best Gundam ever, and that's why the Pat Labors look so cool. And then like for Macross, it's even more direct, because Shoji Kawamori and the kind of main brains behind Macross were in college when Gundam was airing and had a Gundam fan club, and that's where they all met and then came up with the idea for Macross. I just love, like, there's connections like that all over. The writer on Macross was one of the writers on Gundam. He did like 12 episodes of Gundam and also worked with Tomino on Ideon. There's a lot of just like, there's connections everywhere. Gundam is this like big bang, and then everyone goes out and makes stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Gundam is that, it is, yeah, like basically the birth of that whole real robot subgenre. So it's like everything, certainly in like the immediate aftermath, because then you also have like Vodums, which directly comes from Gundam stuff, which then that influences other stuff also. So yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the best part of my presentation though, Sean, on Macross is that I structured it as a twist ending to like my talk of that Shoji Kawamori is the designer of Optimus Prime, because it is a convoluted path to get there. But Shoji Kawamori, while working on Macross, did freelance for this toy company, made the Diaclone car robots. Hasbro buys those become the Autobots, and so Shoji Kawamori is the designer of Optimus Prime. It's a robot called Battle Convoy in the Diaclone line. And so I structured it as like a twist ending, and everyone was like, oh my god, I'm like, and the transforming robots are big, here's the Zeta Gundam, like all that stuff. So
interesting. I didn't know that. That's very interesting, because that is one of the things that Macross is hugely influential on, is that it was the thing that like made everyone want to do cool transforming robots, and then nothing ever does it as well as Macross, because nothing ever has here's a jet with just a pair of robot legs under it, which is the coolest transformation in the history of mecha.
Yes. It's so good. Anyway, we can talk more about mecha later. This coming week, Sean, I'm so excited. We're showing the Gunbuster movie edit alongside Makoto Shinkai's first film, Voices of a Distant Star, which is a really cool little independent animated short. And both of those deal with sort of like time dilation in space. And I think it's going to be a super interesting little double feature. So, and then,
awesome.
and then in 2 weeks, we're doing Transformers the movie, and I'm just super excited about that. All right. But let's go ahead. Sean, what other stuff? Do you want to talk about those games now? Do you want to wait until after the news? What do you want to do?
I'll talk about Lost Judgment now, and then let's do Deathloop after the news, since you have played some Deathloop.
Yes, I have.
Yes. So Lost Judgment, again, is the sequel to the 2018 game Judgment by the Yakuza or Ryu Ga Gotoku Studio. So it's that kind of like legal detective drama spin-off. Generally speaking, it like the original Judgment. So far in Lost Judgment, there have been no characters that have crossed over from any of the Yakuza games. But the setting is broadly the same. So if you played Yakuza 7 and liked the Yokohama map in Yakuza 7, in proper Yakuza Studio form, they have taken that map, just as they always do when they start creating new maps and new areas. They then bring those forward to the other games they do. So Lost Judgment is set in both Kamurocho, the classic Yakuza series location, and Yokohama, the big-ass map from Yakuza 7. And I'm at chapter 4, I think, in the main story, but I've played a lot of the game, but most of the stuff I've played is the side stuff. And so far, I think it's just utterly phenomenal. The basic setup of the story is that Yagami, the main character of Judgment, played again by a very famous TV and movie actor in Japan, Kimura Takiya. After the events of the first game, where the story of the first game is very heavily tied into his past and this whole thing that happened where he was a lawyer, he got a person found not guilty who then later like seemingly murdered a second person. And so after that, and the kind of like tragedy of that, because Yagami was really closely connected to the person he was defending and his girlfriend that he supposedly killed, Yagami quits being a lawyer and instead chooses to be a private detective. And so the first game's story is all about that and a new case that comes up that seems to be connected to these murders in Yagami's past that caused him to quit being a lawyer and choose to be a sort of private detective instead. And after that, you kind of have resolved a lot of the major big traumas in the protagonist's past. So Lost Judgment has a really cool feeling of like Yagami is continuing to do his private detective stuff, but now it's because it's a thing he's like chosen to be, not because he's kind of been pushed into it from his fears of being a lawyer. And so you kind of pick up with that character in his sort of supporting cast as they're just like kind of on top of the world, just being like, we're like the coolest fucking private detectives in Kamurocho going around being super cool dudes. And then they get a new case that is tied to a private school in Yokohama. And so it's all about this sort of instance of bullying that had happened in the past that drove a student to suicide. And then the student who was suspected of doing the bullying then eventually becomes a student teacher and student teaches at that same school and then is found murdered. And so that's kind of the original case. And then I've not gotten super far into where all that stuff goes yet, but I'm sure it's going to lead into a much bigger conspiracy because there's a bunch of weird circumstances about how the body's discovered and things like that that lead people to think that there's a lot more going on here. But what that sort of like premise does, and it feels like the reason why they picked it, is it then means that Yagami, in order to investigate the case, becomes a kind of special advisor at the school. As basically he goes around and he like advises and helps with different clubs, starting with this club called the Mystery Research Club that sort of like reads, mystery fiction and stuff. And the head of that club, Amasawa, is like this like super genius Sherlock Holmes girl. And since you're a private detective, you kind of help out with that club. And then from there, all the side stuff, the big side stuff in the game is you going to other clubs and kind of helping them out. So there's like a dance club, there's like this robotics club, it's not a boxing club, but you go to this like boxing thing that a student is connected to, so there's like a whole boxing mini game. And I've been spending a lot of time with that side stuff, and it's some of the best side stuff I think this studio has ever done, because there's a huge amount of variety. There's probably about 5 or 6 totally unique mini games connected to the club stuff, and all of them have their own little kind of story associated with them. Very much like if you've played any of these games, like for you, Jonathan, Yakuza 7, it's like the way they handle the real estate minigame in Yakuza 7, where it's this minigame, but then there's this whole story that is told through you progressing through the minigame. There's like this maxi story connected to the school that, like, by you doing all the different clubs, you are moving toward this big story of you investigating this like mysterious character called the Professor that seems to be up to no good around the school. But then you're also advancing all these individual stories about those clubs and the cast of characters in those clubs. And it's so much fun. In particular, like, being a high school teacher, then I was the like coach for the debate team, and then I also helped out we had an esports club, which there is an esports club that you also help out with in Lost Judgment, and they play Virtua Fighter because Virtua Fighter has been in all these games forever. So they're like, let's actually make Virtua Fighter a thing in one of the stories, and that's very fun. But it really does, I think, actually a really good job of capturing this like energy that those kinds of extracurricular clubs have, of like all these weird kids coming together out of their like unified interest, and then there's some kind of drama that happens, and then you as the adult Yagami kind of has to like help them out and like give them this nudge to put them on their way. It's really, really awesome. So all the rest of the stuff in
I
the
want
game
to play
is
this so bad from everything you're saying. This sounds so good. I should say
so
I did.
good.
I bought Judgment on PS5. I have it sitting next to my PS5. I have the new fancy remaster. So at some point, it's just that's a long game, and then this is a long game. But I want to play them both. This sounds so. Everything you're saying about the club stuff has sold me more than anything else. I was already sold because I love Yakuza and stuff, but this sounds so good.
Yeah, it's utterly phenomenal. And for people, like, if people want to jump in with Lost Judgment, it's the kind of thing where you could totally start with this game. Like, so far, all the main plot stuff and the way that the Arkane Studio, like, people write their stories, I'm sure this will prove true for the whole thing. They don't really lean on the past games for the main plots of whatever their new game is. Instead, it's more like, oh, I know Kaito-san because I played the original Judgment, so it's like there's some fun interactions with that character that like you get more out of if you played that first game. But if people want to jump in on Lost Judgment, and you want to just start there, you could totally play this game without having played the first one, and it picks you up with like who the supporting cast is and everything very quickly. The other thing I want to mention is that the combat system, this is probably the best combat that they've done. So if you played Yakuza 7, that did its whole JRPG thing. This is the classic brawler style combat. But it's really great because they've now hit the point where they've made enough of these Dragon Engine games with Yakuza 6, Kiwami 2, Judgment, Lost Judgment that have followed that brawler-style combat, that they're at the point now with these new kind of generation of Yakuza games that the old ones were, where they've been building on a lot of the systems and like move types and things like that for long enough that the combat system has a lot of meat on it, in a way that when Yakuza 6 came out, that game had to like redo so much because they made the whole brand new engine, and so they couldn't carry over all the move sets and everything they had been doing for so long, that the combat in Yakuza 6 was very bare bones. And then they've been building up enough where Lost Judgment now has 3 different combat styles for Yagami that you can switch to on the fly. There's the 2 he had in the first game, which is kind of like a one-on-one combat style, and then a one versus a group combat style. And now they've added a counter-focused combat style that's a lot like a really revamped version of a character's combat from Yakuza 4. And that counter one is particularly fun. I think they've like dialed that in to make it a really, really cool style to use that blends well with the others, so that it's very easy to switch between the different styles on the fly in the middle of a fight and use all the different moves. And there's like a huge list of different like heat moves, or I think they call them EX actions now, but like your kind of special finisher moves. So there's a lot of really cool variety to the combat. And it's right of like, I really enjoyed all the JRPG stuff, and I'm glad they did it with Yakuza 7. But I think my heart is with the brawler combat. There's something about it I find so like just immediately satisfying, that there's something really cool about, the variety of having that really cool JRPG combat, now coming to this and being like, and fucking hell yeah, this brawler stuff is so sick. It's so much fun to do. That if you're a fan of that type of combat in the previous Yakuza games, I think this is about as good as it's been since Yakuza 0, which was the previous point where they had like all this built up like legacy that they had that just made the combat super rich, and they've reached that point again, but now with all the like modern advancements that the new engine and physics and all that stuff adds to it.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear, because I've never played the Kiryu Yakuza games where it's all brawler, so this would all be new to me, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to play Judgment. So I'm very excited to dive into these at one point.
One last thing I want to say, just to sell people, if you needed to be sold even more, the last thing I'll say is that you get a skateboard in the game.
Oh my!
And there's a skateboarding club, and there are 2 skateboarding mini games. There's a like trick based one, and there's a racing based one. but you can totally just like I think they added it because Yokohama's map is so huge compared to Kamurocho. That for the they don't have the like level-based thing in Yakuza 7, where in Yakuza 7 you're kind of advancing north up that map as you play through the game. In Lost Judgment, it's just you're going all over the map all the time. So they give you a skateboard and you skate around the map, and it's great. And there's nothing more funny than like skating around in the game drunk because you drink alcohol to like get like certain heat attack bonuses. And I definitely was earlier this morning skating around drunk, and then ran into a group of students, and then had to like threaten them with my counter style because they were like, there's like a gang. The Yokohama Lumon gang has like students that are at the school, and so you counter them out in the street and you have to fight them. And I was like, this would be the greatest headline in any newspaper ever. It's like, drunk school advisor on a skateboard assaults a group of 3 students on the street at midnight would be the most absurd headline I could ever imagine.
But a great headline. Fucking
a great
hell.
Headline.
Yeah. This sounds so good. Man, there's so much happening. Metroid Dread comes out this Friday. I'm playing way too much Genshin Impact every fucking day, but I need to just sit down and start putting time into Judgment so I can get to Lost Judgment before the end of the year, because this sounds like a pretty special game. And yeah. The idea of skateboarding just around like Yokohama in this game, just having played Yakuza 7, yes, please let me do that. And I love, we've made this joke before about Genshin Impact kind of trying to become the video game by putting in just slowly every video game mechanic there's ever been. Uh-huh. I feel like Yakuza is the other one of that, right? Like Yakuza has just been spending decades now putting in everything, and now they're getting to skateboarding. There's not that much I feel like they haven't done in Yakuza from what I've heard from you.
That it does, like, particularly looking at Lost Judgment, with the number of like unique mini games they've added, they're all so much, like the skateboarding super fun. The boxing one in particular is a great mini game. That when you add that with all the stuff of like the poker and mahjong and shogi and batting cages and golfing, and they brought the drone races back from the first game. It's like there's so many that you look at it, it's like you could make a fucking Mario Party game out of this. Like that's surely going to be the next one they do, is just like, well, we've got all of these mini games, let's just like make the big like super mini game with the big story attached to it. Just you play fucking Yakuza Party basically.
Can you imagine if they did that? It's Yakuza Party. You can pick from like all the characters over the course of like the series. You can have your Kiryu and your guy with what's the guy with the eye patch's name?
Majima.
I want to have Majima in a fucking Mario Party thing. They jump and hit the block. You have a fucking board, and then like you have mini games. If you ever land on the same space, of course you have to fight, because that's how it would be. You just both rip your shirts off. They should 100% do that. That would be so good. I would pay a full $60 for that.
Yeah, because I mean, they legitimately, if you combined all the mini games across every like Yakuza Studios game they've made, I mean, it's gotta be like maybe 3 dozen. Like it's an absurd number. And
they're very rich mini games. Like,
yes,
I didn't even get into all of. I played so much Yakuza 7, and I don't think I got into all of. Like, I don't think I ever played the golf stuff in Yakuza 7, and like I never got that good at the baseball stuff. And some of it's just because I was spending time on other ones, and they're all like relatively deep for what they are. So
yeah, because most of those are ones where like the baseball one, they like went super hardcore on that in Yakuza 5, because that one of the characters in Yakuza 5 was like an ex-baseball player, so they like revamped how all that worked. And so it's like that's part of the cool thing of the legacy of the franchise is, as they do different games, they do different mini games, and then a lot of times those mini games live on in like the background, and you go visit it, it's like, why is this fucking baseball game so good? It's like, because they had a whole character that was a baseball dude before.
Yeah, well, they're maniacs, and I love it.
Yep.
Anything else to say about Lost Judgment?
It's super great. I'm like itching to get back to that game, because it's like the only thing I've done with my free time for like the past 3 days, other than doing Genshin Impact, of course. But
all right, well then, Sean, you want to talk some news?
Yeah, what's going on in the news, Jonathan?
We're going to start in the world of anime, but it's extremely popular anime, so don't check out. This is Kimetsu no Yaiba, aka Demon Slayer, Season 2. We have full details on what Season 2 is going to be, and it's pretty cool. It is premiering on October 10th. It'll be simulcasting on Crunchyroll and all that good stuff. And the first 7 episodes of the new season will be a recut version of the Mugen Train film, the highest-grossing Japanese film of all time.
Yeah.
And that'll be 6 episodes, with the first episode of the season, the premiere basically being an entirely new episode with Rengoku on a mission before arriving at the Mugen Train, which... There's a one-shot about that, isn't there? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think they gave that out in Japan, like if you went to go see the movie in theaters, because Japanese theaters are cool.
Yeah, so I imagine that's what that's going to be an adaptation of. But then, obviously, they're recutting the movie into the TV show, but it'll have new scenes, new background music, just a recut of the movie. This is a pretty common thing in Japan, is that you have a big movie, you put it on TV with new stuff. Battle of Gods, the Dragon Ball movie, did that. It's a little rare to just recut it into the series like this. So
yeah, like one thing, because I've seen some people complaining about this, being like, that means we're getting fewer episodes. And like, I think one thing that's like should be made clear is that they aren't doing the Dragon Ball Super thing, which Dragon Ball Super redid those. Right. Like, Dragon Ball Super did not recut those movies. They just redid the stories, and, like, particularly the first Battle of Gods one, they, like, I mean, it's, like, 3 times as long as what that movie is, because they added a bunch of stuff. This is literally, like, this is the reverse of a compilation movie, right? Yes. They are taking the footage they did for the film, recutting it, adding some stuff to make it basically 6 episodes, which is around the, like, runtime of the film.
Yeah, what I was talking about is Battle of Gods. This was before Dragon Ball Super had a TV airing where they added 20 minutes of footage.
Okay, yes.
This is more like that. I don't know if there'll be 20 minutes of new stuff, but this is more in that vein, and you get that sometimes. That's where, like, extended cuts of anime movies come from, usually.
Yeah, which this is, like, I think this is really cool, because I was not sure how, like, what they were going to do with this season, because it didn't seem possible from a practicality standpoint to animate both the Pleasure District arc and the Swordsmith arc, which comes after that, in one... like 2 core run. Like, that just like, and I mean from like a like budget perspective, there's so many huge fights, you just wouldn't be able to do that. And this to me gives me a lot of confidence that like Ufotable knows what the fuck they're doing, because, you know, if you thought like, you know, some of the action in the first season of Kimetsu no Yaiba was incredible, like based on the source material, where they're going is like these much bigger, really elaborate, multi-staged fights that go on for long stretches in the manga. That's going to be like a big fucking deal for them to animate. So this is like, as soon as I saw this news, I'm like, yes, okay, Ufotable knows what the fuck they're doing. This is a very smart, very strategic way, I think, to like give them a really good cushion to animate all the new content they have. And then that movie's so fucking good that I'm perfectly happy to rewatch that story and cut up into those episodes. Like, that's totally fine. And
I
they're
think
not wasting their time reanimating anything.
Right. And I think it'll be fun, and I think it's also just kind of nice that you could put the whole TV show on the shelf and, like, the Mugen Train stuff, because there's no other arc they can do as a movie. So, like, it could just kind of, there's also the TV version of it, and, because we talked when we reviewed the movie, like, what would this have looked like as a TV show? Now we'll get to see, and that'll be fun. Yeah. And the movie will always be there as the definitive version of that content. And then for those first 7 episodes, we will also be getting new theme songs and ending themes by Lisa, who will be doing the opening theme, Akaboshi, and the ending theme, Shirogane. So I'm very excited to hear more Lisa, and giving that a new original OP and ending is a cool thing to do, too.
Yeah. So this, I think, is, like, really smart news. As I heard that, I'm like, God, they're so smart. Like, this is, like, absolutely the best thing to do. Like, it's the most efficient, practical way to deal with what they have to animate. Yeah,
because we had heard a couple weeks ago that this was going to be airing for 2 cores, and my initial reaction was, well, Entertainment District is not long enough for 2 cores.
Yeah.
And you could, just on the, like, chapter count to episode count, you could absolutely do Entertainment District and Swordsmith Village in one season. But boy, that would be a lot, as you're saying, on, like, the budget and just, like, the imagination of having to do it. So basically what this means is that Entertainment District will be, like, 18-ish episodes, and then you'll have these other 7, and that'll make 2 cores. So the new season proper will begin on December 5th with the Entertainment District arc. The villain here, Daki, they've announced will be voiced by Miyuki Sawashiro.
Yep.
That's fucking cool.
That is the right choice. I mean, that is basically, when I read the manga, that is like, that's what I heard in my head. It's a very Miyuki Sawashiro character.
Yes.
And yes, you get, like, they had a little trailer and you saw a little bit of it in her performance. I'm like, they did it. This is where you put Miyuki Sawashiro in Kimetsu no Yaiba. They made the right choice.
Yes. And then the premiere will be an hour-long special. I assume that means 2 episodes, but we'll see. So they'll premiere with 2 episodes, and Aimer will perform the opening theme Zankyo Sanka and the ending theme Asaga Kuru. Aimer, I know from Unicorn Gundam, did some fucking great stuff in Unicorn Gundam. So that is. I'm a little disappointed it's not just Lisa forever on Kimetsu, but Aimer is very good. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, the first season of Kimetsu no Yaiba just stuck with the same opening and ending for the whole time, which is why they could do Lisa forever. Like, at a certain point, Lisa can't do enough songs to be able to do...
That's a good point.
Yeah. And yeah, Aimer is, like, a really good choice. Like, it's stylistically in the same sort of, like, realm as what Lisa does. Like, I feel like Lisa and Aimer are, like, oftentimes paired. They both do, like, a bunch of the opening and ending themes for the Fate series adaptations. Cool. And stuff like that. So I think that's a good choice. And
we are still getting new Lisa. We're getting a new Lisa opening and ending. So, yeah, I mean, this is going to be really fucking cool. I really like how they're doling this out, and it'll be a fun season of that show. And then, yeah, we'll see where they go from there.
Yes, I'm really excited. It's having read the manga definitely makes you like very like, oh my god, I can't wait to see like this, and this be animated.
Maybe then we will get the movie where Tanjiro is on the way to Swordsmith Village and he trips and falls down a hole into another world, and that's what the movie will be, is like the filler thing or something. But yeah, I'm kidding.
He's on the way to the Swordsmith Village. He just stumbles into a random martial arts tournament that's going on that has a secret behind it.
There are worse things you could do. But anyway, that's Kimetsu no Yaiba Season 2. Sounds fun. Let's move into some video game news, Sean. First thing here, I just thought this was super interesting. Sony, which has quietly been acquiring a bunch of developers they work with a lot, like not something that is going to like change the like output a ton, but is like shoring up the people they work with. They have bought Blue Point Games. They are the developers most recently of the Demon's Souls and Shadow of the Colossus remakes that everyone loves. But man, their history goes back a long way. I'd forgotten all the stuff they did. They did the Uncharted collection on PS4. They did the God of War collection on PS3. And I am intimately familiar with this one. They did the Titanfall port on Xbox 360 back in the day, which I played the shit out of and was a kind of like miracle port because Titanfall was not made for the 360. And other than having more tearing than I've ever seen in a video game, ran very well, and I love the original Titanfall. So Bluepoint is great, and the best part of this news is that as their first project now as part of Sony, they are developing their first original game for PlayStation. And I think we said that when we reviewed Demon's Souls, is that this team just has too much talent to keep doing remakes, and I'm very excited to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, this is I think the thing that is very exciting, and probably the reason why this like acquisition happened was I could imagine that this gives Bluepoint like the security for them to say like, okay, let's move on to an fully original project, because I think there's a lot of safety in a studio making remakes of popular games because they're going to sell a certain amount basically guaranteed, whereas like if you're doing an original project and presumably this means it's like an original IP, that's like a big swing. And so them being acquired by Sony probably like makes that a much like kind of safer bet for them as a studio to do. And yeah, this is cool news. Like this is something that this news had leaked a while ago. So it was something that I had forgotten that this had not been officially announced. And then I saw that it was like, awesome. Okay, good. That wasn't just a thing I imagined. They have acquired Bluepoint Games. And yeah, that's just a smart partnership.
Yeah. And I think, based on the PS5 1 year in, Bluepoint and Insomniac are the two developers with the best technical knowledge of this system. And so, yes, put them to work, have another, first-party studio that can deliver something cool. After Demon's Souls, I am very excited what they can do taking that technical knowledge and doing something original. That is just a very cool prospect.
Yeah, because also, like, the way that they do their remakes is so, like, sort of intimately connected to the code of the original games that like those programmers have like as good a knowledge as like some of the stuff in the like what makes games like Demon's Souls and Shadow of the Colossus tick as like anybody other than maybe the people who like originally made those games, right? Like their access to what goes on like kind of under the hood for those kinds of games is pretty unprecedented. Again, outside of the original development team. So that like it'll be interesting to see if that kind of stuff manifests in a way you could tell as an audience member of like, oh, I wonder if like this is where they got this idea, is because they saw this piece of code in Uncharted or whatever. Like, they saw how this like technical implementation was executed on this other game, and bringing in some of those ideas for an original project. I think that seems interesting to me.
And I'm just super curious what it's going to be, because that is such a eclectic set of games they've remade. There's like none of those are even really the same genre, so that's a very fun idea here. But all right, the big piece of video game news this last week is that there was a surprise Nintendo Direct on our off week. It was on September 23rd. So let's hit some of the big things here, because it wasn't like the best Nintendo Direct ever, but it had some pretty cool stuff in it. First and foremost, they announced a new Kirby game, and they have a lot of new Kirby games, but this Kirby game looks really cool. It is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, a big 3D platformer with Kirby, coming April 2022. And fuck yeah, this looks awesome. Like, no Nintendo platforming character has gotten to be in a fucking 3D game in so long, other than Mario. And I think Kirby getting, and it looks like what you'd want. It's a big 3D, colorful Kirby running around in a 3D world. It looks, and Kirby's never really had something like this other than games that aren't, platformers, like Kirby Air Ride or something. So this is very neat. I'm glad they're doing something new with Kirby, because I liked the Kirby game Star Allies that was on Switch, but it definitely showed the like age of Kirby side-scrolling platformers, and like there's not a lot of juice left in this. This looks really cool.
Yeah, I think this is smart, because you can basically set a clock by when Nintendo releases a Kirby game. They release one a year. Like, they have this incredible cadence of Kirby games, or like, as they kind of do, here's a 2D Kirby platformer, then here's like something that's slightly more of a spin-off. And this seems just like a smart time to say, let's do something that's like really big and kind of changes it up. Because it feels weird, the fact that there hasn't been a full 3D Kirby platformer, but there hasn't. Like, it feels like that should have happened at some point up till now, honestly, but they've never done it.
This looked like, watching the trailer, this looks like a remake or remaster of like a missing N64 Kirby game. That's like totally the vibe I got, is like, oh, this is the classic Kirby 64 that never existed, because there is a really good Kirby 64 game, but it's a side-scroller.
Yeah. So this was exciting news. I'm just like happy for Kirby that he gets to be in a big 3D game, because it just feels like Nintendo got very comfortable putting out a lot of like 2D Kirby games for a long time. It's like, you should give that little pink ball something new to do. Change it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Project Triangle Strategy has been officially announced for release, but it is now no longer Project Triangle Strategy. It is just Triangle Strategy, and I gotta say, when they did this with Octopath Traveler, 100%, Octopath Traveler, great name for a game. Triangle Strategy, I'm not so sure.
It's such a bad name. But I love Square Enix doing this. I love them just bringing out games. Like, they should do this for every game. They should, like, it's like, they shouldn't have said, we're making Final Fantasy 16. They should have said, we're making Project Final Fantasy 16, and then a year later say, it's like, turns out Project Final Fantasy 16, it's just called Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, I mean, this game still looks cool. It's basically Final Fantasy Tactics 3, but it is coming out March 4th, 2022. Looks very good. Still looks... I love that fucking 2D, 3D hybrid thing they're doing. It looks so good. We got our first trailer of Bayonetta 3. So Bayonetta 3, which was announced at the 2017 Game Awards in the first year of the Nintendo Switch, and has been missing in action, not like for inexplicable reasons. It's because Platinum has been making a billion fucking games.
Yeah.
But now we have gameplay. It's a real... And, like, not just a little bit of gameplay. Like, this was a big gameplay trailer. It's clearly a real game. Bayonetta has a new haircut. She's got braids now. She also got a new haircut between 1 and 2, so, of course, she had to get a new one for 3. They say it's coming 2022. And it looked fucking good. Like, it didn't just look good. It looked like it was running really well. And I was very impressed. It looks fucking great. They had a little bit of a fake out at the beginning, making it look like an Astral Chain sequel. And I would totally play an Astral Chain sequel. That game rocked. But Bayonetta 3, you guys know I love Bayonetta 1 and 2, so glad she's back.
Yes, this was like reaching the point where it started being like, is this game just vaporware at this point? Because it was, it had been a long time since we had gotten anything from it. And it's always good to then follow that up with, here's not just like another tease or something. Here's like an actual, as you said, a big gameplay trailer. And the game looks very good. It looks Bayonetta. Awesome.
And I think, it like reveals that, like, I don't think anyone at Platinum was lying over these last few years. It was like, we're working on it. We've just got
Uh-huh.
A, B, and C that we're also working on, and they have to come out first, and blah, blah, blah. And so it was just this sort of weird thing that happened, and now it's here, and that's cool. And now the other shoe to drop is Metroid Prime 4 one day. At least we're getting a Metroid game right now, so it's not as conspicuous in the meantime. The other big announcement of the day was that they are expanding the Nintendo Switch Online service offerings. It's been only NES and Super NES for 3 years now, and they are expanding it with N64 games and Sega Genesis games. This is coming in October. The N64 will include Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Star Fox 64, Ocarina of Time, at some point Majora's Mask. I know that's not a launch game, but they said it's coming. Genesis will have 14 games at launch, including Contra Hardcore, Echo the Dolphin, Sonic 2, Streets of Rage 2. They will be selling N64 and Genesis wireless controllers the same way they've done with the NES and the Super NES. But the big asterisk to all of this is that these are only coming as part of an expansion pack version of the service, which they have not detailed. But Nintendo Switch Online right now is a $20 annual subscription. I think there's a monthly version, but I don't remember what it costs. And they've said there will be a way to upgrade if you have existing annual subscriptions. Because I have it upped through 2022, I think, because I got a $10 version of it once too. Also, you know, it's been very cheap. So they're gonna. I don't know how much it's gonna be. I think, given that Nintendo Switch Online has had, they have steadily expanded the NES and Super NES library, but they never added other systems. It is just unbelievably shitty of Nintendo to charge extra for that, I have to say. Just shitty. I don't know what else to say. And, the Sega Genesis thing is cool in theory, except that I already own, the Genesis collection on Switch, and it has I don't think it has Echo the Dolphin. That one's been missing in action for a while. But all those other ones, they're everywhere. So, I don't really need Genesis. I want Game Boy. I want GameCube. I want all this stuff that Nintendo should have on the Switch and doesn't have. And it's just very strange to me. The N64 stuff, it's nice that Ocarina of Time will finally be on the Switch. Mario 64 was already on Switch, so that's weird. But, I don't know.
Yeah, if this was a at no additional cost thing, it would just be cool. It's late. The Nintendo Switch Online stuff just seems so barren. But yeah, them as saying, and now we're going to charge you extra for it was that's that Nintendo touch. That's that extra little why do you guys always do this with your online shit? Why it always has to have this extra little thing to sour the deal in some weird way. Yeah, and I'm with you. The Genesis thing is weird because I feel I've there are 5 million different ways to have bought all of these games on any modern system, including the Switch. Sega is not particularly precious about its legacy games, so they put out new collections of all this kind of stuff all the time. They're doing a new Sonic the Hedgehog collection in I think a few months that's coming out. So it's the Sega Genesis stuff is probably looks nice on paper, but for people who actually want to play those games, you probably own those games in a bunch of different ways already.
And it's just weird because, I've been banging this drum about Metroid because it is still just actively bizarre to me that we have Metroid Dread coming out this Friday, and Metroid Dread is being marketed fully as Metroid 5, because that's what it is. It is the 5th mainline side-scrolling Metroid, and you can play original NES Metroid and Super Metroid on Switch, but there is no version of Metroid 2 on Switch and no version of Metroid Fusion. And Dread is a really direct sequel to Metroid Fusion. It's in all the marketing. What the fuck are you doing? Why is there not a little collection? Why are there not Game Boy games on this? You had this huge library of Game Boy and Color games on 3DS and a pretty big library of Advance games on Wii U. Just put them in a collection and put them out, or do it as part of online. This drip feed thing is so bizarre because, when Sony drags their feet on past stuff, it annoys me. But Nintendo is the one who has the giant catalog everyone wants to play. So it's extra weird with Nintendo, and Nintendo has done it on all their other recent hardware. So it's just, the whole thing is bizarre. I don't know. It's annoying. We'll see. The one thing that's kind of cool is that with the N64 games, N64 has a lot of fun multiplayer games that you'll be able to play online now with this. That was there in the NES and Super NES, but what the fuck were you going to play? Super Mario Kart? Okay. I could imagine getting some fun out of, like, Mario Kart 64 on this. But then again, they're probably not going to have, like, the Mario Parties, because Mario Party is getting a new game that is all based on the N64 stuff. So...
Yeah, and would you really want to play Mario Kart 64 online? Like, when you have other Mario Kart, like the more modern Mario Kart right there, you want to play, here's Mario Kart 64 that has no music while the track is on, because they couldn't handle that, so you have the, like, noise playing the whole time, and you can't see more than 3 feet in front of your fucking car because it's the N64 and the entire track is covered in fog.
Let me be clear what I mean, Sean. For, like, 10 minutes with a friend for nostalgia's sake, yes. For, like, a normal... and that's why it should just be a free part of the online thing, right? That's what I mean.
Yeah, because of all of those games, I look at, like, Mario Kart 64, I'm like, you don't want to put that out. Again, you don't want... you're just going to crush people's dreams, because let me tell you, you can't go back to Mario Kart 64.
No, it's not
especially if you played any Mario Kart before or since. Like, Super Mario Kart and the Super Nintendo is better than fucking Mario Kart 64. So it's like you're putting the worst Mario Kart out on the Switch. Congratulations.
All right, couple more things. They had a big look at Splatoon 3, which is now subtitled Return of the Mammalians, which I love, or maybe that's the name of the campaign, but that's coming 2022. Yoko Taro, turns out, is creating a new card game RPG called Voice of Cards, The Isle Dragon Roars, that is coming October 28th. What do you think about that, Sean?
I feel like I don't understand what it is. Yeah.
But that's okay.
I like Yoko Taro. Yeah.
That's exciting, though, when it's Yoko Taro, right? Maybe it'll be absolutely nothing. Maybe it'll be something really cool. I'm excited to see the reviews. Square Enix announced Chocobo Grand Prix. It's Mario Kart, but for Final Fantasy with Chocobos. Okay.
This is one where I could not figure out if this was a new game or a remake of a game that already got made, because it feels like if they haven't done this, it's just like, you know, this feels like it's a like N64 game, right?
Yes.
That where you had that period where every franchise had some sort of kart racer out there.
The one I remember is Mickey's Speedway USA.
Yeah,
no, it is new, but it looks like it was made on like the Wii, and like that's it's like, it looks like it was like one of those like Wii eShop titles, and now they're re-releasing it. Oh well. Two really cool things here. These were leaked, but they were confirmed at the show. There's a Castlevania Advance Collection out now. I haven't picked this up, but I'm absolutely going to, because this is the 3 Castlevania GBA games that are basically sequels to Symphony of the Night, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and Aria of Sorrow. Plus, as a bonus, the Super NES version of Rondo of Blood, Dracula X, which is not the good version of Rondo of Blood, but is fun to have as a bonus. That came out on the day of the Nintendo Direct. I am excited to pick that up at some point, because Castlevania fans who've played the GBA games swear that they are like some of the best in the series, and I believe them. There's a lot of GBA games that are kind of like that, so looks cool. I'm glad Konami is fucked up in a lot of ways, but at least they're getting their old stuff out in collections. That's nice. Because you put this together with the Castlevania collection they did a year ago, and we're getting close to having like all of it out, which is neat.
Yeah. Is this on everything, or is it just Switch?
It's on everything.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I should probably pick this up, because like you, I never actually played the Castlevania games on Game Boy Advance, because when I didn't like get into Castlevania as a franchise until like after the Game Boy Advance was very old. But like you, I've always like been very curious, because everyone loves these games so much. And Symphony of the Night is fucking great. So other games, because this is like the dude who made Symphony of the Night made these. So
yes. So that's cool. And then ActRaiser Renaissance, an HD remaster of ActRaiser, beloved SNES game, was also a same-day release on the Direct for everything, like the Castlevania collection. It's on all the systems. I have never played ActRaiser. People love it. It's cool that it got a little remaster.
Yeah, I played ActRaiser like years ago on an emulator, because I knew that people liked that game and it seemed cool. That game is very cool. I haven't looked at this HD remaster at all, but ActRaiser... Giving ActRaiser some love is awesome, because the thing that's cool about that game is it's like this hybrid where you have 2D like platforming action stages, but you also have this like meta strategy level where you're kind of like fixing this town up, and then you go into action levels. And it's like a very like conceptually ambitious game on the Super Nintendo that was executed super well. So
yeah,
it's a nice little thing for you to bring back, as well as it had Yuzo Koshiro of Streets of Rage fame did the music for that game.
And my understanding
was involved
is,
in the remaster.
Yes, they came back for the remaster and did new music and stuff, or supervised the remastered music. So very cool. I always like, you always get at Nintendo Directs, people save little announcements like that and just show up Nintendo at like preserving old games. So yeah, it's good. All right, Sean, now let's go down to the depths of hell and talk with the devil himself for...
This is the real news out of this fucking Nintendo Direct, because no matter what else they said, Bayonetta 3 finally getting announced, whatever, this was the thing that, like, as soon as this happened, nobody could talk about anything else from this fucking Direct, because the screenshot that came out of this is one of the best screenshots in the history of, like, fucking Twitter.
Okay, let me give the news and then we'll react.
Yes.
Shigeru Miyamoto himself came out, and I'm thinking, oh, is Miyamoto working on a new game? No. Miyamoto is working with Illumination Entertainment on a Mario movie. We already knew that. I think the Illumination Mario movie is kind of like climate change. It's this thing that we know is coming and is going to kill us all. But it's just been off in the future enough that we haven't had to think about it. And just like the planet currently being on fire, the Mario movie is imminent, because now, courtesy of Miyamoto-san, we have casting for the Hollywood Mario movie by the makers of Despicable Me. Chris Pratt is starring as Mario. Anya Taylor-Joy is Peach. Charlie Day is Luigi. Jack Black is Bowser. Seth Rogen is Donkey Kong. And Keegan-Michael Key is Toad. Some of those I actually think are fairly inspired pieces of casting if you're going with Hollywood celebrities. Like Charlie Day as Luigi is, I think that's perfect.
Yes, that's a good one.
I think Keegan-Michael Key as Toad is like genius.
Yes.
Some of those other ones, though, like obviously the one that has had the most reactions is fucking Chris Pratt as Mario. We've died and gone to hell. This is... Our sins have manifested in Chris Pratt as Mario. And I can't say we didn't have it coming. We've been pretty shitty as a species. This is probably us getting off easy. But definitely you feel the weight of our sins in that announcement.
It is mathematically the funniest casting you could have done for this fucking movie. There is nobody you could have picked that would be more hilarious than Chris Pratt as Mario. Like, it feels like we would have made that joke like 5 years ago when they did like announce that they were making this project. We definitely talked about it on the podcast. I don't know if we did any like dream casting or not, but like Chris Pratt is the like joke answer that is funny because it seems possible, but you wouldn't think they'd actually do it because it's such a bad idea. And then they fucking did it.
They did it. And they had pictures of each actor next to their character. And like for most of them, it was a color photo of them just at an event or something. For Chris Pratt, they used this like black and white artsy headshot, and it had the text under it, Chris Pratt as Mario. And I think is that the photo you were referring to, Sean? Yes.
It's so funny, yeah, because as you say, like, most of the other ones are pictures of, like, as you say, this, like, at, like, a red carpet event or something. They get their picture taken, and it's a nice, normal colored photo, and they're smiling towards the camera. And then for whatever reason, for Chris Pratt playing Mario, they decided what we want is this very moody, smoldering actor headshot that's all in black and white for Mario. It is so fucking funny. And then the other one that I think is utterly just inexplicable but is fucking hilarious because I can't even imagine what this is Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong is the other one that just makes me fucking cackle. Because what the fuck even is that? Like, what is because with Chris Pratt, I get it with Chris Pratt. Like, it's awful idea, but he's just like, bankable white male movie star guy. Like, whatever. It just feels like they just said it's like, oh, who was in the Lego movie? Chris Pratt? Well, let's get him. Who came up with why Seth Rogen is Donkey Kong? Where is even the logic?
Okay, Sean, I'll tell you the logic because one of our listeners said this to me on Twitter, and I think they are 110% correct. This is so they can make the joke for adults in the room of bananas being like weed and have Seth Rogen deliver it, and it'll be Donkey Kong as a banana stoner, and that is 100% what they're going to do. Because with all of these, one of these that's fascinating to me is Jack Black as Bowser. I can imagine a good version of that. I can imagine a version where you do Jack Black and have him give a real performance and it's fun. It's not going to be that. It's just going to be Jack Black undirected, giving lines, going crazy, and then it'll be coming out of the mouth of something that looks like Bowser, and it'll just be dissonant and weird and awful. They're going to do the same thing with Donkey Kong. It's just going to be Seth Rogen talking through Donkey Kong. Like, it's just stupid. And, like, yeah. Back to the Chris Pratt thing, though. Chris Pratt has had the most fascinating career to me, because he's actually started on Dawson's Creek, I think. Something like that. And then he's on Parks and Rec. And on Parks and Rec, he's Andy. He's this goofball. And he's fun. And everyone liked him in that setting. And then he becomes a movie star with Guardians of the Galaxy. And cut to like 10 years later, and we all fucking hate him. Because he's been like... He has no real range. He's good in like a certain narrow band that I think Guardians and Parks and Rec used well. And even then, I think Guardians, you see the limits of what he's capable of. And then he's tried to be in all this other stuff that is just awful, like Passengers, the movie where he, like, really violates Jennifer Lawrence and then she falls in love with him. It's bad. Go look it up. The plot of that movie is fascinating. He's, like, tried to be in all these action movies, like Jurassic World. He's not an action star. He just, no. And, like, and then Lego Movie, he's kind of fun. But then, like, now he's Mario. And it's just like, boy, never has the oversaturation of an actor been signified in one image as much as smoldering headshot, Chris Pratt as Mario, and we're all done with it.
Yeah, it's hilarious because the other thing you have to come to is just like also the fundamental truth that like any idea for this movie is bad. There is no way to make a good Mario 3D animated movie other than if you made it like a silent movie or something. Like the only way you could do it would be to go to like stylistically experimental or like unconventional that Hollywood would never do. So obviously this is going to just be a dime a dozen, just like put it in the fucking like kids animated movie machine and just crank that one out. So it's like there's nobody they could have cast that would have been like that seems like a good casting for Mario, because I don't know what the fuck that is. Like, Mario as a voice performance is a, like, mildly offensive Italian stereotype. Like, there's a cool voice I can imagine and a good vocal performance for the character as a character.
No, the only thing you can do is Charles Martinet, but I think Charles Martinet would be the first one to tell you it's not really a voice for an entire movie. He
says a sentence at most, and even when Mario has to go for an entire complete sentence, you're stretching the bounds of what the character can manage.
Yeah.
Generally, you want just like woohoo, and that's Mario in his sweet spot, and then you can go let's go, and then you're like okay, that's still Mario, and then when he starts then expanding out to full sentences, let alone God, forgive a fucking paragraph, you can't manage that. It's impossible.
It really is amazing, though, that this has made the live-action Mario movie look kind of better, because like Bob Hoskins as Mario is pretty inspired casting. Like, that's pretty great. He was fun in that movie. John Leguizamo as Luigi was a fun idea. And actually, I thought John Leguizamo, he had a point on Twitter this week where he said, like, good luck to these actors, but I do miss when Mario was colorblind. And he pointed out that, like, in the Mario movie, a Latino man, got to be Luigi, and Bob Hoskins was Mario, and they did that. And it was weird that they were father and son, and they were also the Mario brothers. But that is fun casting in that movie. Like, that's the fun part of that movie. And, like, yeah, these are all white people, other than Keegan-Michael Key, who is playing Toad. And I am sad that they didn't get Jordan Peele as Toadette. That would have been funny. Get Key and Peele as Toad and Toadette. Just make it great. But, yeah, I mean, it's just, now we have the inescapable reality that there will be, an Illumination Entertainment movie of Mario that'll be roughly of the same quality as their fucking Dr. Seuss movies, which are terrible. And, a Nintendo, I mean, I know why. It's money. But why Shigeru Miyamoto being the one saying all of this is kind of what hurt most. And then the end is when he said, and Charles Martinet will make a cameo. And it was just like that was the last little kick in the balls. God, it's sad.
Yeah, it was always a bad idea. And it's just like the closer you get to it being a reality is even worse. We should eventually we should do a fucking podcast on the live action Super Mario Brothers movie, because
Okay.
it is an unbelievable thing. Have you ever like watched it, Jonathan?
Yes, but it's been like it was on like TV at one point, and I think I taped it. I have not watched it as an adult. I am ordering the DVD from Amazon right now. It is $3.99. It's on back order, but you can get it. So
the last time I watched this movie was in high school, and I remember like watching it then, because I had seen it when I was a kid, because everybody, when you're growing up, like you couldn't have not seen the Super Mario Brothers movie some way, somehow.
Right.
And I remember being like, when watching it, not as an adult, but like as someone that was like a sapient entity, being like, there is some shit in this movie. And I've always wanted to go back to it, and this just seems like a good excuse.
Okay, so Sean, I have ordered the DVD for $3.99 on Amazon, so we can watch it. This will be fun at some point in the future, and I am also just feverishly anticipating the trailer for this movie, where I assume we will just clear the deck, and all the podcast will be that week is picking apart the first voiced lines of, Jack Black as Bowser, making fart jokes inevitably.
Because it is, the thing is, with that live action movie, it is basically the ideal cast for the three leads. I mean, Bob Hoskins is the only actor in the history of Hollywood that can play Mario.
Yes.
And it's so sad that he died young. John Leguizamo is Luigi, and then fucking Dennis Hopper is Bowser. like you couldn't ask for a better cast. It's just unfortunate that it is in like the most insane movie Hollywood has ever fucking made.
Sean, do you want to know my favorite fun fact about the live action movie?
What is it?
It was directed... Oh, no. It was produced by... Sorry, I'd always thought it was directed by... It's produced by the guy who directed The Mission, the classic movie with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons. Forever, I thought he also directed that. I'm wrong about that. Okay, that would have been funnier, but no, he did not. He just produced it. That's still funny and weird, and I don't know how that happened, but yeah. I do love there's a Mario movie produced by Oscar-winning director Roland Joffé. All right, you want to move on?
Yeah, what's the other news we got here, Jonathan?
Doctor Who.
Yes.
We knew already that current showrunner / destroyer of Doctor Who, Chris Chibnall, would be leaving Doctor Who next year, along with current Doctor Jodie Whittaker, the 13th Doctor. There is a 7-episode 13th series airing this year in 2021. There will be 3 specials to end her tenure and Chibnall's tenure in 2022. But then beyond that, we were waiting to hear what would happen. And what the BBC has announced is that Russell T Davies, the man who brought Doctor Who back in 2005 and ran it through the Chris Eccleston and David Tennant tenures, will be returning to the series in 2023, which will be Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. And they also say he will be running the show for, quote, further series beyond. So Russell T Davies will be back on Doctor Who. And of course, Russell T Davies has done other stuff than Doctor Who. Yes. He was already one of the biggest kind of respected names in British television in 2005 for stuff like Queer as Folk. He is really one of the leading voices of queer narratives in television in the world. He's done a lot of stuff since Doctor Who. He obviously worked on Torchwood. The only season of that he directly show ran was the Children of Earth thing. But yeah, so he has done a lot of stuff, and now he is coming back to Doctor Who, and I will say, in my heart of hearts, I think Doctor Who should always be looking forward. But I did breathe a really big fucking sigh of relief, because if there's anyone I trust on this good earth to come back and fix Doctor Who, it is Mr. Russell T Davies.
Yeah, I feel like Russell T Davies must just have like a like big red telephone somewhere at his home that when Doctor Who's in trouble, a red light on it lights up, and then the phone rings and he picks it up and it says, there's just a mysterious voice that says, "Russell, we need you." He says, "Okay." And then he goes and makes Doctor Who, because yes, I'm with you that, like, I think if I had been told this news, like, without having experienced the Chris Chibnall Doctor Who, and someone said it'll be Chris Chibnall, and then after that RTD will come back to the show, I'd be like, that sounds awful. Like, that's it. Like, you can't do that. You can't move backwards. Doctor Who's always about changing. But like, the reality of the Chris Chibnall situation is so dire of his run on the show that it's like, you need like a confident pair of hands, I think, on the wheel to correct the ship. Particularly, like, a lot of that is also going to be, we need to see what Series 13 is going to do in regards to the like big timeless child, like, continuity fuck bullshit thing that Chris Chibnall has done. Because if he doesn't put all of his toys back in the box, you really need a confident pair of hands on the wheel to fix all that shit. But even if, like, there's no, like, weird story stuff that's overhanging from the Chris Chibnall era that needs to be, like, dealt with, just, like, the nature of, like, Doctor Who as a program needs to be, like, sort of righted back properly, because there's never been a period in the history of the show that has been so dire that it just feels like the show has, like, lost its sort of, like, core principles. Because even in, you know, the direst hours of, like, the Sixth Doctor run, where the show is generally utterly fucking terrible, its heart was always in the right place. I think the thing that's most painful about the Chris Chibnall years is that so much of it just feels like its heart is in the wrong place, and you can't really, like, watch Doctor Who that way. So having RTD come in and like, correct the show feels appropriate. And then also it's exciting because, you know, Russell T Davies has, as you said, he's not been, like, off doing nothing since he did Doctor Who. Like, in the past few years, he's done some miniseries that have been mostly streaming that have been extremely well received that now I really want to watch to see, like, if that stuff will inform his run on Doctor Who. But the fact that Russell T Davies has made a couple of, like, really highly critically acclaimed TV shows, or, like, miniseries. They're not, like, long-running shows, but they're all, like, one-season-long shows. Since he left Doctor Who, particularly the last couple of years, makes me actually super excited about this. Just see, you know, he's not the same creative figure he was when he left Doctor Who. Like, he's done a lot of stuff. The world has changed a lot. So there is something very exciting to me about the idea of Russell T Davies coming back with, like, some cool ideas to do with Doctor Who and how his maybe perspective and style for the show will have changed since then. Because, you know, it's cool to see a, like, artist returning to something that they did in the past and kind of with a more matured perspective or more, like, experienced perspective, tackling similar subject matter can always yield pretty interesting results.
Absolutely. The two shows he's done recently that I've been meaning to watch, and now I absolutely will, I think they're both on HBO in the US, is called Years and Years. That aired in 2019. And then this year, he did a show called It's a Sin. It's a Sin is set in the 80s, and it's sort of about a group of gay men living through the HIV/AIDS crisis in the UK. And both of those were really highly acclaimed, particularly It's a Sin. I heard a big interview with him around the time It's a Sin came out, and I just remembered being like, this guy is so fascinating to hear talk about stuff. He's such an interesting guy. And, you know, I just think you and I both have our problems with the Russell T Davies years. We do not think they're perfect. And I do think, in general, people have kind of rose-colored glasses about those years because, look, David Tennant is really hot and we all want to fuck him, but, like, his episodes were not uniformly perfect, and I do think there's, like, a rose-colored glasses on that. But what was Russell T Davies really good at with Doctor Who? He wrote fantastic doctors, and he wrote fantastic companions, and he had a really clear sense of, like, the format of this thing and how to structure it for modern television. That is what you need right now. And maybe that sounds like a low bar, but it is hard. And, like, it's something that I think you should never underestimate the lift that it was to redo Doctor Who in 2005 for modern television. And he pulled it off with real aplomb. And, you know, I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that in his original Doctor Who run, he did have nods to diversity in a way Doctor Who had not had before in terms of, like, having gay characters on screen and mentioning, like, I remember one of the first times I ever heard a man call another man their husband on TV was in a Russell T Davies Doctor Who episode. And at the time, that was aspirational. It was set in the future when someone said that. Russell T Davies will be coming back to a very different world and a very different TV landscape, and maybe we can have a gay companion. Maybe we can have a doctor who is coded as queer. Maybe we can, like, and honestly, if anyone who's ever written on Doctor Who is equipped to do the female doctor thing right, it is Russell T Davies. I still think the best person for that is probably a woman who has not written on the show yet. But, like, I do think he is someone who could do that in a really interesting way. And, you know, it's just a breath of fresh air and going, like, okay, the show will be in good hands. And I think the best thing Davies could do at this point is spend a couple years building a good staff and, like, training other writers coming up to, like, do Doctor Who, and then be able to leave the show in good younger hands. Like, that's what the show really needs right now. And I do think, like, you and I probably prefer the Moffat era to the RTD era, But I think RTD is the right person to do this task right now. No doubt about it.
Yeah, because while like his episode writing could be very hit or miss, like, and he's got some like really big hits. I mean, I would say Midnight is one of the best modern episodes of Doctor Who. I think the problem is that RTD very rarely afforded himself the opportunity that Moffat did a good job of like leaving himself room to do episodes that didn't have to be big world-ending episodes of Doctor Who, and RTD didn't do that enough for himself, I think, on his own run. And when he did do it with Midnight, it's an incredible episode. But like whether or not his individual episodes were amazing unto themselves, like he just was such a confident showrunner, and he was so good at making the show like tick. Because that's the thing with Doctor Who is like TV doesn't make a lot of shows like Doctor Who anymore, and it's a big, complicated, crazy beast to try to manage all these different episodes that are all like different fucking settings, and every episode outside of like the two leads have completely different casts and all that kind of stuff, and doing that like year in, year out. Like Doctor Who has been a show that has had pretty chaotic scheduling and things like that for a long time. Not all that is always going to be the showrunner's responsibility, but it is like notable that RTD had by far the most consistent run of any modern showrunner of Doctor Who, where it's just like, nope, it's just like we're just running Doctor Who. And then he had the 1 year of specials was like the only time he didn't do a full year, like season's worth of Doctor Who in a year. So getting someone who has like that like efficiency and capabilities as a showrunner and knows how to like put a show together, that's more important than having that showrunner also be someone who can write the best episodes in Doctor Who. It's like you need the show to function, and if you get a good showrunner who then like part of their task is finding good writers, you will have good episodes of Doctor Who no matter what.
Yes.
It's like it doesn't matter to me if those good episodes are the showrunner's episodes. I just need good episodes of Doctor Who.
And when I say like I want to see RTD come back and like build a team around him, I say that because he was so good at fostering talent. When you look at his run and the number of great writers who came through the doors and just made all-time classic episodes of Doctor Who, one of whom was Stephen Moffat and went on and did his whole run, he fostered a lot of really good talent and like really had a good eye for bringing in writers and directors too. And so it's honestly, the whole format of modern Doctor Who, we have RTD to thank. Like fundamentally, It has never changed from what he laid out. I think it is an exciting prospect, and it is definitely like it feels very right at this moment in time, and I'm glad he's willing to do it. And I also have to say, this feels like about as close as we're going to come to the BBC saying, sorry guys, we fucked up. This feels like definitely a like hit in case of emergency, break glass moment. Particularly
them officially announcing this before this season even fucking airs feels like a real like tacit admission of like this got pretty fucked up. So it's like, don't worry, you only have to like stick out for this one more year, and then we're getting the guy you guys all really love back, RTD. And it's just like it does, it makes it, I think, for me easier to, because I'm going to watch this season, and it'll make it easier for me to know this, like, okay, on the other side of this are some golden pastures, some nice nostalgia of RTD coming back. But like it is also, I think, very, if you are a person, and there are these people out there, I don't really understand the taste there, but they are, that like Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who. Like this has got to be actually super uninflating or disinflating for you, because like it is the BBC just saying, yeah, we're going back to the old shit, and just saying like, yep, nope, we fucked it up. And I just find that interesting that they're just totally willing to take the wind completely out of the sails of this like season that's going to air this year, and just say, yeah, we fucked it.
And part of that is practical because they have to cast a new Doctor pretty soon, because they're going to be shooting Jodie Whittaker's Regeneration. And to cast the Doctor, you have to have the person who's going to cast them, which will be Russell T Davies now, because you have to write the character and then cast to that. So some of it's practical, but I think you're right. Like, even if some of it is practical, they could have done this behind the scenes and then waited for like this season to finish in a couple months. No, it was like, do not worry. I assume they've seen the episodes and know they're terrible. And just, it's so funny. I'm also curious. I was looking this up. Murray Gold has kept working with Russell T Davies on various productions. I wonder if he comes back to Doctor Who. I would understand if he didn't want to, because he composed on Doctor Who for over 10 years. But that does make me semi-curious about that.
Yeah, because another part of this announcement was that when Russell T Davies takes over, it's not going to be entirely an in-house BBC production. It's also going to be through the Bad Wolf TV production company, which currently is doing the his Dark Materials show on HBO, because Bad Wolf is a bunch of people who, I forget their names, but it's like the producers that worked with RTD during his years. So they're also coming back, kind of partnering with RTD through a production company that was basically made out of the fallout of RTD's era on Doctor Who ending and them going and making their own TV production company.
Interesting. I had seen the thing about the Bad Wolf thing, and I didn't know if that was just... Sometimes big creators come in and they automatically get that production credit, but that makes sense, actually.
Julie Gardner is who I'm thinking of. So she was the producer on the show.
Julie Gardner was great on Doctor Who. Like, if you're talking about a behind-the-scenes producer who's like creative work you don't see, but who kept the trains running, she was really important. So that actually excites me just as much as the RTD thing. You know?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good to know. It is nice to have a little bit of optimism about Doctor Who, and it feels like they have a plan to right the ship.
And when I saw this news, it felt like the world was a little bit brighter. You know, it's like it's hard to live in a world where Doctor Who's just complete utter garbage. It's like you just don't want to wake up in the morning in a world where you're just like, I don't even have like good Doctor Who to look forward to.
I know, it is sad. It is sad, and now it will be brighter. This kind of balances out the Mario thing a little bit. You know, we're gonna have to suffer through that Mario movie, but we also are gonna get new Doctor Who from people who know how to make it, and that's good. All right, Sean, do you want to talk about Deathloop?
Yes, let's wrap up the day with some Deathloop talk.
So you have finished the game.
Yes, I finished it like a week ago or so.
I have played through like the entire first loop, like the first 3 or 4 hours, and a little beyond that, and I just don't really like this game. I don't know what to say. It has not grabbed me. I was kind of interested in it during the opening like hours and all the tutorializing, although I will say the amount of tutorializing kind of killed me, and we'll talk about that. And then once it kind of sets you free, I've tried it several times and I just have not gotten into it. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Just doesn't quite feel like my cup of tea. So that will be my contribution, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, because I feel with Deathloop, it's interesting. Where I think it has a rough opening, because I absolutely agree that like that opening tutorialization section is too long and it's pretty tedious. But then once you get through that, I think, and you get into like the loop of the game of like literally doing the loops, and sort of building up your character build and getting all the upgrades and all the powers, and sort of managing all of that stuff and following all these different kind of threads the game gives you. There's a big middle section of the game that is tremendously fun, and I think is like the best designed stretch of any Arkane Studios game I've played. And then it's got, to me, classic Arkane Studios style, it's got a very wet fart of an ending. It just kind of stops. I think you can kind of almost feel that like in the general discussion around the game, where I think there was like a lot of hype around the game like a little bit shortly after its release, because people were in this like the meat of it, which is really good. And then once it's over, I think the game like very much just kind of like comes to a stop, and then you kind of leave it. I left it fairly disappointed, because I was hoping that would be one of the things that Arkane would have kind of fixed for this. They didn't quite get there all the way. But I guess like to talk about this game a little bit, you should talk about where it comes from, because so for people who don't know, Arkane Studios is the studio that made the Dishonored games as well as Prey. So I played Dishonored, its DLC, Dishonored 2, Dishonored 2's DLC, and I have not played Prey. So my background with this studio is the Dishonored games, and this is not the exact team that made the Dishonored games. This is Arkane Lyon, but if you play Dishonored and you play Deathloop, it's very obvious there is a lot of DNA shared, of like multiple powers are the same across the two games and stuff like that, and a lot of the concepts are similar. And so Deathloop is part of what is, I would say, like the worst named genre in all video games, which is the immersive sim genre, which is a genre that encompasses about a dozen games, mostly like it's Deus Ex and the games that have followed in Deus Ex's tradition. So there are not a lot of immersive sims, but there's a group of people that like love the shit out of this genre, and I'm not really one of them. I've always been interested in immersive sims. I played Deus Ex, I played the Dishonored, and like I like those games.
Define that for us, Sean, because
Okay, yes. Yeah, so immersive sim is basically a Deus Ex style game, which is what I would think of it as. Immersive sim is what Warren Spector, the designer of Deus Ex, called it, and people have stuck with that genre name. It's a meaningless genre name. Every game is an immersive sim, because every game simulates something, and every game strives to be immersive. So immersive sim, it's the stupidest genre title in all video gamedom. Like, Metroidvania is dumb because the Vania part is unnecessary, but at least Metroidvania gives you the direct lineage and history of what the genre is, so it's easy to identify what game you're talking about. Immersive sim, if I say immersive sim to someone, if they haven't played one of those games, they don't know what you're talking about. Basically, what a Deus Ex style game is that I think of it as a vent hack shoot game. That is a game that is presented to you usually in a series of levels in a single player campaign. Each individual level is ultimately linear in the sense of that there is a single defined goal that you're trying to reach, like an enemy you're trying to kill, or a computer you need to hack, or something at the end of the level. But there are lots of different pathways you can take through the level, and a lot of different ways you can solve the problems the level presents you. I say lots of different ways, but really there are 3 different ways to solve problems in immersive sim games. You either go through a vent, so you sneak, you hack a computer, so you do techie stuff, or you shoot the problem in the face. And this, I call them, I like to think of it as a vent hack shoot game. Probably the most popular game that is broadly an immersive sim is BioShock, but BioShock kind of waters it down a bit more, and I think makes it like, I think BioShock is better than most of these games are that I've played, but it makes it a little bit more accessible. But usually you can think of it as any of those games that are first person. They're about exploring big maps and finding fucking audio logs and little passwords with safe codes on them, that you have some skill trees that either are stealth oriented, like hacking oriented, or something. If it's like Dishonored, it's like hacking adjacent, it's like magic power bullshit, or it's you're being lethal and you're killing your enemies, and they're kind of stealth action first person shooter games. So does that clear it up a bit for you, Jonathan?
I basically knew what you meant, but I just realized, a lot of people will not know what you mean for the exact reason you explained. Immersive sim just sounds like all video games.
Yes. So, like I said, there are people who, I know that immersive sim is, their jam, is their favorite type of game in the world, and I've always, been interested in them and thought I would really like them. But, if you go back to our podcast in the past where I've talked about playing the Dishonored games, they're always games that I respect a lot, and I like a lot of elements of them, but ultimately come away from pretty disappointed. Dishonored 2 was not even in my top 10 games of that year, because I was pretty disappointed by it as a sequel, because it was just so much more of the same of Dishonored 1. And my main problem with the immersive sim genre is that while it gives you all these different ways to solve problems, it is incredibly tedious to try to play the game multiple times to actually experience the different routes and build different character types. And I think that particularly came an issue for me when in 2016, the Hitman reboot came out, and Hitman 2016 is such a beautifully designed game that has a lot of the same principles. I wouldn't really call it an immersive sim, but it has a similar idea of here's a problem, a big problem in a big map, and here's a million different ways to solve it. And the game is designed in a meta level to make it really easy, fun, and engaging to replay those scenarios over and over again, so you can try out all those different solutions rather than just play through each map once, reach its conclusion, and then go on to the next one, and then you hit the end of the story and you're like, well, I'm done. Hitman designs itself so it both incentivizes you and then clears out all the obstacles, so you can just replay those maps immediately and there's no sort of issue with it. Immersive sims don't do that. If you play Dishonored and you go through like I did and play it super stealthy and don't kill anybody and do your kind of pacifist run, which that game has this annoying morality system that really kind of incentivizes the player to do that, and that's another problem I have. It's a kind of feels like it's sort of wagging the finger at you if you use any of your violent powers, and it's that's feels like it's against the design goals of the game for you to do that. But if I then wanted to, as I did, go through the same level and say, fuck that, let me just get all the crazy death powers and let me blow up people's heads and kill them with rats and all the crazy shit you can do with Dishonored, I can't just go back into the level and do that. I need to start over from the beginning of the game and level up those powers and do all that shit. And eventually get back to that level I wanted to play. If you want to do the time travel level in Dishonored 2 a different way, that's the third to last level in that game. You have to play 10 hours of that game to get back to the time travel level if you wanted to try it a different way than you did the first time with different abilities. And so I've never really played through one of these games more than once because I find it super tedious to do so. because Hitman is right here telling me, here's a game that has figured out that problem, and here's are all these games that haven't. And Deathloop is not 100% of the way there, but I'd say it's about 80% of the way there to solving that problem, and that's what I really love about it. When you're in the middle section of Deathloop, when it's at its richest, the thing that the game's core design allows for, because you are looping through this like sort of 4-level cycle, where there are 4 levels in the game. Each level has 4 different variants based on 4 different time zones. So every time you go through a loop, you pick a level that's for the morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. And each level is pretty different based on whichever time zone you're in, and there might be different objectives depending on which time zone you're going to. So every time you go through the loop, you're playing through those different kind of remixes of those levels depending on the time zone, and you're going through and oftentimes accomplishing either the same objective, like killing the visionaries, which are the main enemies in the game, that every time you kill them, you get their power. And if you kill them multiple times, you level up that power. So for those, you're literally doing like a Hitman. I'm just killing the same target multiple times. And oftentimes there are other objectives that are similar but different enough that you're not literally doing the exact same thing. But what that allows you for is every time you're going through that loop and you go back to the beginning and you're saying, oh, now I'm going to go to like that up dam level again in the morning, you can say, well, this time I want to do something different. Instead of going super stealthy and picking like the invisibility power and the teleport power and my like silent like nail gun and all that shit, this time let me get a giant shotgun. I'm going to get the power that like makes it so I do way more damage and like take way less damage. And I'm going to pick the power that's like psychokinesis, where I just like throw people against the walls. And I'm just going to go in super loud, super hard and kill everybody. And the game has all these really rich, super fun character builds you can do, because you have all these different upgrades you can get, and you can combine them in so many different ways to do different sort of strategies. And the game is designed at a fundamental level to make it very easy and trivial to just go through and play through similar objectives, but play through them a totally different way. And that is, I think, to me, the magic of Deathloop, is when you're in that middle section that there's so much for you to do, and you're still unlocking a bunch of new upgrades, so you have all these like new different kind of character types you can try out. It's super rich and super fun and super engaging in a way that, for me, the Dishonored games totally missed out on, because I could never get off of, once I decided the stealth track, there's no real reasonable way to get off that track and still be able to do all the other stuff in the game. You have to kind of stick on that track every time you start. And in Deathloop, there's no rails you're on. You're just saying, yeah, fuck it. This time I want to go in and I'm not even going to use a gun, which this is my favorite build. I'm just going to take my big machete, and I'm going to take like every ability I have that makes me as fast as possible. And then there's one upgrade you get that allows you to regenerate your health when you get a melee kill. And I'm going to take my teleport power, and I'm just going to teleport around this level as quickly as I can and just fucking cut everybody's throat with the machete and keep regenerating my health every time I take them down with the machete. And you play through the level utterly different than you would any other way, and it's super fun and it's super exciting. And that, to me, is where Deathloop really works well.
Interesting, because the thing is, you, in the last 10, 15 minutes, have explained what the game is better than the game explains what the game is in 3 hours.
Yeah.
There's a lot I like in the opening hours. Like, I like that it's a really graphically cool game. The levels are really detailed. The voice acting is so good between the two leads. That's very fun. The shooting and all that is super, like, fun and satisfying. All of that gameplay stuff you're describing is great. But it is maybe the worst tutorialization I've ever seen, because it is incredibly overbearing. Just like constantly like, go here. It doesn't give you any freedom. It's completely on rails. It's constantly giving you these just massive text dumps of like, read all of this, and tutorializing like how to use the menus and all this stuff. And the problem is, every step of that just left me confused. None of it ever felt like it was clarifying. It honestly felt like the game didn't have a good sense of its own systems, because honestly, that's usually what happens with it. Like, if a game is excessively tutorializing, that usually means that, like, the systems haven't been really well thought through, and the game doesn't know how to present them. It's not that the game is actually complex, because if it was, Dark Souls would need a 10-hour tutorial or something, right? Like, you know, really good complex games don't need to do this. And so I'm now in the part where, like, I'm in the loops, and I don't really get it. And I think it's because the game just, like, I guess it technically tells you how to manipulate menus, but I don't know if it really sells the idea of what the game is. Like, you saying that makes me want to go back in and try it and see what I can do with it. But, like, the game itself doesn't do a good job with this at all.
I 100% agree. That I think there's a couple things the game does that doesn't work well for it. It's trying to do this whole starting in medias res thing where your main character Colt wakes up on the beach where you always wake up at the beginning of the loop, but he has no memory, he has no idea why he's there, and then he gets like this mysterious call on this radio from Juliana, who is the character, if you've seen the trailers, that is all like trying to track you down and kill you. There's this whole like invasion Dark Soulsy type thing in the game that I don't think is like particularly worth it. Like I like the Juliana character and I like her interactions with Colt generally. But I think where they gamify it, I didn't engage with it much. I kind of turned it off about halfway through and just was annoyed when people would invade my world, and I never invaded anyone else's. But the Juliana character goes on the radio and sort of starts explaining all the loop shit, and then like it's this very convoluted process, both in terms of the game sort of like stumbling its way through sort of explaining its systems to you. It takes the game like an hour for it to give you your fucking like shift ability, what is the equivalent of blink if you played Dishonored, but like the short teleport thing, which to me is like, I don't know why you would ever take that ability off. You can only put 2 abilities on. I had shift on the entire time because it's like fundamental to me how you maneuver in these games. Because that's like how Dishonored is designed, and Deathloop has so much legacy from Dishonored. And it's just like the slow plotting way in which they introduce the game systems, not giving you, I think, upfront some of the ones that are most important that you really need to learn about, like the powers. And then also trying to sort of stumble its way through this very like confused narrative setup that ultimately has, I'm just going to say, effectively no payoff. The ending is there's 3 endings, all of them are bad. Like they're just like very sudden. It's the same way that all the Dishonored games end, where it's just like you get maybe what is literally a minute or 2 minute cutscene, and then it just hits credits, and you're like, okay, that's nothing. So it introduces this huge convoluted plot setup with the visionaries and going through the loop, and you have to kill all the visionaries in one loop. It just takes so long to try to introduce all those concepts to you that then once it lets you loose, I think it doesn't give the player a good idea of what the loop is, ironically, right? It doesn't actually take, like, it doesn't effectively tutorialize you through the process of doing the loop again. And I think it would have been way smarter for them to have compressed that into, let's do, like, the same level twice in a row or something in a loop format, so that like you get that sense of that's what the game is about. It's so much about going through the loop and then coming back from the beginning with all the powers and knowledge you've gained, and then going through again with that like new perspective and those new abilities, going after different objectives. And it doesn't take you through that process effectively well. It's too railroady for too long, and then it like doesn't actually lead you into and let's take those like sort of rails off and let you go free well enough. So it's kind of tutorialized poorly on both ends of that experience.
Yeah, because like where I am, I just like I have a couple levels open with like objectives, and I've gone into one like over and over and can't like quite find what I'm doing. And then I try to go forward. It's confusing, and I don't. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, what I would recommend for people who are starting to play Deathloop or having that issue is I would recommend prioritizing going and killing the visionaries and just getting their abilities, and get one of each ability and get shift as soon as possible. I think it's Charles. You can get him, I think, in like the noon, so you can get him pretty early in the loop, because that one is, I think, utterly critical to being able to play the game. And it's fucking so, because they give it to you once in the tutorial, but then they use that as the concept of, and then you loop, and if you didn't like basically spend a resource on it, anything that you haven't sort of spent this resource on in a loop is lost after the loop is done. So you have to like, you're getting this thing called residuum that you're then kind of spending to expand your overall like items and things you have in your inventory, including your powers. And I think giving you that shift ability and then taking it away is like, fuck off, just give it to me. Like you need this to play this game. So if you go into your menu, and there's you have the arsenal leads, I think it's called. You basically have 2 big menus that have all the different objectives you can track. Go to the arsenal leads and just pick Charles first, and then whichever other ones in whatever order you want to do them in, to start getting all of the powers you can equip. and get all of those, because then once you have all of those, that's then when you can start experimenting, because that's the most significant thing you can do to change your build, is whether or not you're using psychokinesis or you're using invisibility or you're teleporting or whatever it is you're doing. That changes your playstyle the most, thus making it more fun when you're going through and picking the other objectives that you unlock as you go deeper into the game. You can tackle them in whatever way you want because you're experimenting with all the character builds that are available.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the kind of thing that I'm sure I would have figured out if I were not as busy and like didn't have other things I wanted to do. But it's the kind of thing where like when the game makes you work for it. I have Genshin Impact I'm playing every day. I've been playing through Metroid Fusion to get ready for Metroid Dread. I've got Gundam. I've got obviously all my work, and so I just haven't like wanted to engage with it on that level. But I will give it another try with everything you said. It just that I was kind of shocked by like just how long the intro is for like not doing what I think it's trying to do. It's so weird.
Yeah, and again, this is a thing that like. I have the issue with all of Arkane's games that I've played. Again, excluding Prey, I haven't played that one. But Dishonored, its DLC, and Dishonored 2, like, they all have this issue of, like, they don't tutorialize you effectively well. I think the problem is that the game... Immersive sim games, to me, are so, like, in love with the idea of what the game is. They're so in love with the idea of how open everything is that they kind of lose track of, like... Video games have been, like, influenced by Deus Ex since Deus Ex came out. And, like, immersive sims are not actually, I think, particularly special in the variety of ways you have to solve objectives. And I think they still generally think of themselves as being very different from other games when they're not anymore. And I think that's always just been a problem I've had with Arkane's output. Is, like, I just kind of wish the studio would, like, let its hair down a bit. And again, I think Deathloop is, like, 80% of the way there. It is the studio letting its hair down quite a bit and kind of figuring out, we need to let go of some of that shit and get more fun with it and let go of some of these like legacy ideas that made sense in 2001 when Deus Ex came out, but don't make sense in 2021 after we've had 20 years of that game being super influential. And I every time I've played an Arkane Studios game, I have this feeling of like, you're so close to making what might be like one of my favoriteest games ever, but they always fall short of it. Like, Deathloop is my favorite of their games. Like, I think that middle stretch where, like, the game clicked for me was quite long. I mean, it's like 10 hours of me being, like, super into the game. That part was so much fun that I think I can't really imagine it not being on my top 10 of the year, but I don't think it's not in that, like, top 5. It's not going to be as good as Lost Judgment or stuff like that. But it's that studio, I think, is getting gradually closer to me to kind of really cracking what their games should look like today. It's just, I think, taking them a very long time when Hitman just did it already in 2016 and we're on Hitman 3. And it's like, come on, guys. Hitman has solved a lot of these problems, and I really wish they would, like, take more from that than they have.
I definitely felt that while playing Deathloop so far was the, like...
Yeah.
I could just go play Hitman. Like, they're saying, like, there's this thing about, like, the 8 visionaries you have to get. And I was imagining, like, oh, so it's going to be, like, set me loose and figure out what order am I going to hit all in. No, and it doesn't do that at all.
Yeah.
And like, Hitman would do that. Hitman sets you loose in a level and is, like the one in Berlin in the new one where it's just you go through and there's, like, 5 in this giant area and go get them all and do whatever the hell you want. And it's so cool.
Yeah, like Hitman is such a good example of like really effective tutorialization, especially like now that they've done it a couple of times. They've gotten very good at what is a much more complicated game than Deathloop is, but tutorializing it really effectively. I was to say that like my biggest issue with Deathloop comes into like the way the game ends, not in a story sense, but in a gameplay sense, which is the thing that if they make a Deathloop 2 or whatever happens, like whatever next Arkane game they make, hopefully takes a lot of these ideas and continues to expand on it. The one main thing they need to do that is what Hitman does is give you way more ways to sort of like finish it, in the sense of the ultimate goal of the game is to be able to assemble things in such a way by accomplishing different objectives that you can eventually do a loop of those 4 levels where you kill all 8 visionaries by the end of it, because you can't do that from the beginning. There are certain things you have to do to that kind of like makes, okay, now this character, instead of showing up on this level in the morning, will show up on this other level in the afternoon, and there are 2 other characters that are already on that level. So now I can hit all 3 of them at the same time, go somewhere else in the morning, hit this other character I can't get to move. And that's like a really cool concept. The problem is that there's only one way to do that. There's only one way to assemble all the visionaries into 8 like sort of ones in a day, and the game does very much like if you use it, all of its like sort of checkpoints and stuff, and objective selection, it will just like follow you through every single step. You don't have to remember, oh, I need to go here and press this switch and this gets this character to go there. The game will just like put a little like box over everything you need to do. And that is where they need to like sort of, if they figured that out, I think this game would be like one of the best games I've played in a long time. If they found a way that there were a lot of different methods to manipulate those visionaries to get that 8 to line up and be able for you to kind of as a player figure that out better yourself and sort of like arrange that as this big puzzle, because that is the Hitman philosophy. That's what Hitman would do. In Deathloop, as all these immersive sim games do, at the end it becomes very linear. Like no matter how many like ways you go through, ultimately it feels like it sort of like filters down into that one point. And that's part of like the thing I think the studio I hope gets away from it that the Hitman games have solved. Because that's the most disappointing thing, is that at the end of it you're like, well, no matter how I went about it in that middle section, ultimately it's all about getting this guy here, these 3 people at this party, and then eventually I just hit them all in a row in one go, rather than it feeling like I figured out my solution to this problem and did it my way. That would be the thing that would turn this into like a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. And it definitely, the critical reaction to this game has been fascinating to follow.
Yeah.
Because on like release day, when the reviews all broke like the embargo was up and all the reviews came out, they were like unbelievably glowing. Like I remember the Polygon headline was, Deathloop is one of the most incredible games I've ever played. And like they were all very glowing. And then a couple days later, you started getting the reviews from outlets like Kotaku that don't time to embargoes and like wait for their reviewers to finish it. And they were like much more mixed. And then a couple days later, you got the outlets that had done reviews on day one coming back and like I remember then Polygon had a headline that was like, how Deathloop fundamentally fails everything. Because obviously Polygon, their headlines have 2 modes. It's either utterly like best thing ever, or like just this thing is destroying Western civilization. And like, I don't know if those were the same writers at Polygon, but like, it's just this kind of stuff where it was like clearly like, oh, there was like this, and I don't know if it was like reviewers didn't finish the game or what was going on there, but there was this like really heavy hype, and then like a little more muted, and then like a week later, then there was like this incredible backlash, and now I have no idea where people are on the game. Like, it's very strange to me.
Yeah, I'm with you, where I think I could kind of see where, like, if you're in the midst of the best part of the game, I can see like having this very electric reaction to it. Like, if we had done a podcast last weekend, I don't know exactly where I would have been, but say that I would have been at that point of the game. I don't remember where I was. But if we had done that podcast, I might have been super glowing about it on the podcast. But yeah, having finished it and then also been away from it for a week, and then also having put a lot of time into Lost Judgment in that week, which is, you know, it's a very different kind of game. It's also just a much better game. Like, it's so much more effective and smart about accomplishing what it's trying to do, that I've cooled off on it a bit. But I don't want to come across as like saying that the game is bad, because it's definitely not bad. It's more that like, this is how I feel about Dishonored. It's like it doesn't fully get all the way there, and it's almost more frustrating to me as a player in that way of like, you're so close to hitting this thing that I think like you could do, and you've gotten that much closer, but you're still 80% or something like that of the way there. If you were at 100%, it would be like an incredible like masterpiece. As it is now, I think it's like a really good game that I would be very comfortable putting in the lower end of a top 10 list, but it's not in that like upper tier to me.
Yeah. Interesting. Anything else to say about that, or are we done with Deathloop for now?
The last thing I'll say about Deathloop, because I remember mentioning this on the podcast like 5 years ago when I played Dishonored 2, which was one of my biggest complaints about the Dishonored games, and I'm just assuming that Arkane Studios people listen to this podcast because they implemented my exact idea for the solution. The way that Deathloop handles its like mana bar is exactly how I always wanted Dishonored to do it. Dishonored's fucking most annoying design choice was to make it so that the mana bar you expend whenever you use your magic powers, which if you're playing one of these games, you want to use them all the time, is something you can only recharge by using a consumable item. It doesn't recharge on its own, which actively disincentivizes you from using your powers, like Blink, and it's fucking annoying. Like, and the game was so poorly designed that, like, around that idea of you should just be recharging your power, but you're not, that like they have to make the concession that you recharge just enough to use one blink power, because the game's not designed for you to be able to play through it without you being able to teleport, basically. And it just always pissed me off. It was such a stupid choice in the first Dishonored game. They didn't fix it in Dishonored 2. I couldn't believe it. And then Deathloop comes out, and it is exactly what I always wanted, and I talked about this on the podcast. It's like, just make it a thing that recharges, and it has multiple segments, that each segment is how many powers you can use, and you can do Deathloop. You've got 3. You can get an upgrade thing that will give you 4, and you can use powers 4 times in a row before it recharges, and then you have to wait for it to recharge. And it's so freeing as a player of these games to just be like, I can just teleport whenever the fuck I want, and the game's not like tut-tutting me and saying like, now you got to use your like blue crystal juice or whatever to recharge all your magic bullshit. I can just use my powers whenever and then eventually recharge, and fucking thank you, Arkane. It is, I could not believe that they didn't make that change in Dishonored 2, and it was so annoying. Finally, I can just teleport whenever I want. And it is a thing that made my most fun build, the melee build that relied a lot on my teleport power. I wouldn't even be able to play that way in Dishonored because I just ran out of magic juice too quickly. Now they've fixed that problem. Thank you, Jesus.
Good to hear. Next week on the show, I'm not sure what we're talking about because Sean and I had a miscommunication, and I was under the assumption we were doing the next weekly Suit Gundam on Reconquista in Gi next week, and you were under the assumption it was in 2 weeks. So you haven't watched any of it yet. So that'll be in 2 weeks for practical reasons. So next week, we will talk about something. And it'll be something fun. Oh boy.
Yeah, we'll talk about something. It won't be about these things, but I do, because I just realized I do actually have these over here. This is where my box cutter is. Eventually, one thing we will talk about, Jonathan, that I just got in the mail, is I do have 2 Xbox copies over here. I have bought Enter the Matrix and Path of Neo on the Xbox. Enter the Matrix, by the way, that was a sealed copy. That was an original copy. They were only like $20 a piece. So eventually we can do our Matrix shit.
We could start our Matrix shit next week if you want, if you're into it, Sean.
We can do whatever. We'll have those conversations off the air, I guess.
Okay.
But next week, there will be stuff.